All right, we got another Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez video. This from Fox News says, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the voice of an ignorant generation. Now, I want to make something really clear. It's very important. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the past few weeks has gained 300,000 followers. She is a snowball rolling down a hill that is gaining more and more traction and becoming more and more influential and important. Videos like this, yes, they do contribute. First of all, I am not a conservative. I do not care if Cortez becomes more and more famous, nor do I care if Donald Trump is more and more famous. You see, this is the thing about me being kind of a centrist, center-left. I've seen people comment saying Tim supports Cortez, so of course he's gonna, be favorable towards her and all this stuff. It's like, no, hold on. Like, I support a decent amount of what her policy positions are, but not all of them. Maybe around half, because she does go a little too far left, and she does propose things that I think are impossible. But more importantly, she says things that are so insane and stupid. She's doing bad. She's causing problems for people who have political views like I do. I'm not the only one to bring this up. David Pakman did a video about this, saying that when she says things that are wrong, okay, she makes it harder for the left to actually try and prove their point. This is why I think it's so important to talk about her and this op-ed. The voice of an ignorant generation. Sure, if you can call her that. I'll say she's ignorant, but she's extremely influential, and there's a couple reasons. She says so many ridiculous things that people on the right they keep talking about her. She's low-hanging fruit. This empowers her, and it also makes it much more difficult for the left to actually sound coherent. That's my problem with Cortez, and that's why I'm going to read through this, and we're going to comment on it, talk about socialism and taxes. The majority of American millennials identify as socialist, according to surveys by both Reason Root and the Victims of Communism Memorial Fund. That's the bad news. The good news is that just 32% of millennials can define socialism. The frequently wrong but never in doubt freshman Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez may indeed be the voice of her ignorant generation. Or at least that percentage of them, the majority who can't. So I have a friend. We haven't talked in a while because, here's the thing. I always talk about how I have no problem being friends with somebody based on their politics, for the most part, right? So I have friends who are social liberals. I have friends who are conservatives. However, I do not have friends who are identitarian. Especially, for the most part, I have no friends who are identitarian right. Right? So basically, anybody who I did know who sort of started to move in that direction in the past, I've just basically disassociated with most of them for the most part. And admittedly, it was without naming anybody, there's one or two people who I would say I was friends with, but not in the sense that we hang out all the time. There were some people that were conservative that I had associated with, every so often, and would consider them to be friendly with, but now they've sort of gone off in an area where I'm kind of I'm just going to ignore those people. But here's the thing, the friends that I do have that have become overtly left-wing identitarian, I'm still friends with many of them, but it's the same circumstance where this ideology is becoming so pervasive that I have no problem being friends with somebody who's like, we should have a flat tax, or somebody who says something like, we shouldn't have a flat tax. But when you start espousing things about race and identity and all that stuff, then I just kind of disassociate from all of those people, right? And so over time, there absolutely have been people who have now associated with the right who are starting to embrace that. It's a fact. And there are way more people, in my opinion, who are embracing left-wing identitarianism, and that's a huge problem. But anyway, let's continue. During an interview on CBS's 60 Minutes, Anderson Cooper asked Cortez, when people hear the word socialism, they think Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela. Is that what you have in mind? He neglected to mention the vicious socialist regimes of Cambodia, Ethiopia, Poland, Romania, North Korea, and China, among others. Sure, but come on, I think Cooper pointed out some of the more egregious affairs. Cortez retorted, of course not. What we have in mind, and what of my policies most closely resemble, what we see in the UK, in Norway, and Finland, and Sweden. Oh, so in other words, not socialism. In fact, her economic proposals bear little resemblance to British and Nordic public policy. As early as the 1950s, Britain began to privatize its social security and pension programs. By the 1990s, as decades of socialism caused economic growth to stagnate, Sweden followed suit. Neither Sweden nor Norway mandates a minimum wage, and Britain demands a minimum wage well below Ocasio-Cortez's proposed $15 an hour. Britain and Finland offer a lower corporate tax rate than the United States, and all the nations she names have lower rates than her proposal of 28%. None has a healthcare regime as socialistic as her proposed Medicare for All scheme, which constitutes a full federal takeover of healthcare. There was a point where I was very much in favor of national health care, I thought, why not? What about a public option? Well, here's the big problem that we've run into with the individual mandate, which puts me in kind of a, I just don't really know anymore position. We are now in, we're below replacement rates in terms of fertility. The way Social Security has always worked is that young people pitch in a bunch of money that pays for a smaller amount of old people. And so long as your population keeps growing, that can work. That's what we're seeing in Europe. Sweden's trying to bring people in to maintain their welfare state. But it doesn't work, because eventually even immigration can't keep your numbers up, and eventually you reach a point at which you can't keep growing. Thus, what we're seeing across all of these countries that are falling below population replacement is that they can't support a national healthcare system. Old people go to the doctor way more than young people. So if you have 100 young people and 50 old people, the 100 young people are paying for the 50. That makes sense. There's a ton of young people and few old people. However, now that it's inverting, you have more grandparents than grandchildren, you've got way more old people going to the doctor, and young people are like, yo, there's not enough of us to pay for all your healthcare costs, and thus it doesn't work. So it's crazy to me to see that on the left you have kind of paradoxically calls for national healthcare. Well, I don't want to get into the specifics of that. Let's read on. But basically the point I'm making is more often than not you have policies on the left that kind of are contradictory. Like, for instance, they want smaller classroom sizes for schools so kids can get a better education, but then they want to open up schools to everybody. And it's like, well, hold on. If you open up schools to everybody, there's not going to be enough room, and there's not going to be smaller class sizes. It's going to be bigger. You can't do it both ways. It's a big challenge. Cortez's ignorance of economics and foreign affairs typifies her generation. Despite holding expensive degrees in both economics and international relations from Boston University, Cortez threw up her hands in exasperation during an interview on Margaret Hoover's firing line program, laughing, "I'm not the expert on geopolitics." Then what is your international relations degree worth? This is another reason why I think college is a huge waste of time. Look at Cortez. Okay, she has a degree in economics and international relations, yet she claimed an accounting error from the Pentagon could pay for something. She said the $21 trillion accounting error could pay for 60% of healthcare, and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not what an accounting error is. Do you understand how money works? Then she says she's not the expert on Israel-Palestine. It's like, well, hold on. You went to school and got a degree in international relations. I don't think you actually, what do they do in college? What's the point of going to... The seed of millennial miseducation, which grew into the tree of lack of knowledge, as activist educators substituted ideology for scholarship, is finally bearing its rotten fruit. According to one survey, 1/3 of millennials believe President George W. Bush killed more people than Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. Over 40% of millennials have never heard of Mao Zedong. Another 40% and 30% respectively are unfamiliar with Vladimir Lenin and Che Guevara. Now that last part I find hard to believe because they love wearing his shirts. 2/3 of millennials cannot identify Auschwitz, and 22% have never heard of the... What? 22% have never heard of the Holocaust? Twice the percentage of American adults on average. Man, the great dumbing down. I gotta say, if these polls are true, wow. I know what all of these things are. You don't know who Lenin is? Is that a joke? The Simpsons made a joke about it. And I will say this too, there's a lot of times I find myself knowing something because of The Simpsons, right? There's a Simpsons episode where they show Lenin preserved in glass and he breaks out and becomes zombie Lenin, like, "Rawr," and like people scream. And it was funny. I learned some of that because of The Simpsons. Auschwitz, for instance. There's references to this in Family Guy, I'm pretty sure. Like, if you watch TV shows, maybe that's it. Maybe they're this group of young people have essentially separated themselves into their own unique, weird external bubble, where you have Gen Xers, Boomers, Gen Z, still in the mainstream, watching movies, liking comedians like Kevin Hart, and watching Family Guy. Millennials, cord cutters, maybe they're on the internet, stuck in their weird little activist bubbles. Millennials might not know much, but according to a 2016 Harvard survey, they know they don't support capitalism, with 51% of young adults rejecting economic freedom. And this is the craziest thing to me. Have you ever just Googled what capitalism means? It literally means the right of the individual to control the fruits of their labor. That's it. It's the right of the private individual to control what they produce. That's like normal. Socialism is when someone else determines what they can do with what you make. That's bad. However, mixed economy, I'm typically in favor of. Like, it makes sense to take taxes and allocate those taxes in certain ways. For the most part, I believe mostly we need to make sure that there's economic competition. The regulation from the government and taxation should be kind of like a light guiding force in a sense. I don't mean like engineering taxes or sin taxes. I mean quite literally like, hey, we need to regulate pollution in water because we've literally set one of our rivers on fire. That actually happened. A river burst into flames. And so that's where it makes sense. But for the most part, people need to be able to decide how they want to work, when they want to work. And I believe there was a study that shows the easier it is to start a business, the better the economy is for a country or a nation. So he ends by saying, socialism is an economic disease born of envy and ignorance. Unfortunately, both abound in our present politics. The sickness has found an attractive spokeswoman, perhaps sadly the voice of her generation. Well, I don't think Ocasio-Cortez is necessarily the voice of her generation. She's the voice of socialists in her generation. But admittedly, I am finding that many people on the left, young millennials, have become identitarian, and they're becoming socialist, and that is an extremely psychotic and dangerous combination, and it worries me greatly. But you know what? That's why I'm going to build a van, and so when all hell breaks loose, I'm going to go live in the mountains, away from the fringe lunatics who want to take all your stuff away from you. Anyway, more videos to come. I'll see you in a minute. Thanks for hanging out.